So you've been so eager to pay your bills, my gosh. And this is a kind of a clussy process, but during this next lecture, I'm gonna pass around this sheet. This is what I have. This is where you'll see if there's bad spellings of your names, this is where I took them from. This is my really crude way of doing bookkeeping. I record the monies that we received, and I list the books you ordered. Now, I'm going to pass this around, so if you say, well, no, I paid for the whole thing, you moron, then come talk to me. Or if you want to pay something down, the total is $300 for the tuition and lunch. Tuition and lunch. Books are separate. So I'm going to pass this around table to table. We go this way, and then this way, okay? So there's this. Slip your check, if you've got check, in between the two sheets of paper, so that it doesn't block everybody else from seeing, okay? Here, meanwhile, this is the book bill, okay? And again, you need not pay today. Your credit is good with me. I will really kind of want it. For sure, I'll be on you by January, February, because the kitty will be getting kind of empty. But we start the year in good shape. Some have asked about scholarship. There is some scholarship monies. If you need scholarship, not today, but next month, come see me, and then we'll divvy up the scholarship pie. Okay, there's some people, graduates have contributed money. I got one graduate, she was a student at lacrosse and took the class, and I paid for it. And so ever since, she's contributed, she lives in Wausau now. She contributes money so that somebody else can take it. So that's the sweet. So I'm going to pass this around. Also, I'll have, scratch and sniff, think and do kind of things to look at. So this is the Passover Seder. One thing about Jewish writings, Hebrew is no, don't say back to front.
Left to right.
Left to right. Right to left, actually. We read left to right. Hebrew is written right to left. So while the cover looks normal, the first page is back here. Okay? Remember? Right to left. So this is an example of at a Passover meal in a pair of people's house, they'd have many of these. And the family would this is their retelling the story. There's no official one. This is just an example of it. All right? All right.
But the text is still left to right on the page.
The text, the English text is left to right, and the Hebrew is right to left. You'll learn some Hebrew.
Father, who do we write the checks out?
DSBS, or Bible School, or Father Mark. All right? It all goes to the same. So, all righty? So, back, lecture, finally, we're going to look at the text. The first unit, the first lesson is Exodus 1 through 6. It's the story of bondage. All we know about Moses is from the Bible. There are no extra biblical evidences. Like I said, nothing archaeological that would confirm his existence. But before the central figure gets introduced, there's a need for a savior has to be introduced, is set up. So the text begins, now Christians call the book Exodus. In the Hebrew Bible, the books are called by their first words. These are the names. That's the name of the Hebrew book in the Hebrew canon. It begins with a list of all the Israelites, the Hebrews who left the land that had been promised to Abraham and journeyed during the years of famine to Egypt. Verse 5. All the offspring of Jacob were 70 persons. Now, that assumes you know who Jacob is. We'll get to Jacob eventually. It's Abraham, Isaac. Jacob was the third patriarch. He has 12 children, 12 boys, a couple girls, but it's the boys that matter. I don't make the story up, I just tell it. So look at verse 7. But the descendants of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. That phrase, fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied. If you know your Bible, that should be a reflection back to Genesis 1. The creation story. God says, go be fruitful and multiply. The author of Exodus is saying, and Israel did what it was told to do by God. It was fruitful and multiply. Verse 8. Now there rose a new king over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war befalls us, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Notice Pharaoh is never named. It's not Pharaoh Bill or Pharaoh George. And the beauty of, first, which shows that the story is a little bit, it's not really a historical book. Modern histories want to know what Pharaoh was that. No, it's Pharaoh. Like we would say, Führer. Okay? Doesn't matter what the Führer's name was. There's only, in every generation, there's a Pharaoh. There is somebody who's all-powerful and all-knowing, and so that allows the Jewish people to use the story over and over and over again. It's not limited to one historic event, moment, but there are people like the Pharaoh all the time. Okay? God has told the people to be fruitful and multiply, and Pharaoh says, no, don't multiply, don't be fruitful. So from the very beginning, we find out that the real battle here isn't between Pharaoh and Moses, or the Israelites and the Egyptians. It's between God and Pharaoh. Who rules? Who controls? Now, you might happen to know that in ancient Egypt, the pharaohs thought of themselves as divine. Huh? So that's the real battle. Who's God? God in Genesis says, be fruitful and multiply. Pharaoh says, no, don't. There's too many of you. Okay? So we're going to be shrewd and get rid of you. Now, in this, there is initially a kind of a comic story. The midwives of the Hebrews, now we don't know if they're Hebrew women or if they're Egyptian women, we're not really told that. Shiphrah and Puah in verse 15. Those are not Jewish names, but in any case, they kind of collaborate with the Israelites, and when because it was their job to strangle the child at birth, and when it doesn't happen and the children are still being born, Pharaoh complained. The king of Egypt says to the Hebrew midwives, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women, if it is a son, kill him. But these two women say, well, but the Hebrew women are tough, not like Egyptians. And by the time we get there, the children's already born. So what you have here is that, I made a kind of a bad joke earlier about the Bible isn't often very focused on women. Women are almost always minor players in this culture, but they have a story. And here's the first example. Mighty Pharaoh cannot control his midwives.
The deep state.
Okay? That women are out to confound Pharaoh. Pharaoh wants to eliminate the Israelites. The women will not collaborate. Now later on, we're going to find out that Moses gets rescued by, wait for it, Pharaoh's daughter. So the hated Israelite slave boy, who should have been murdered, is being raised up, and Pharaoh's paying the bill. Okay? That's irony. That's humor. That's even though Pharaoh's in charge, he's not. He's not in charge. Okay? So the women fool Pharaoh. Verse 22. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. That leads to the famous story of the birth of a boy to a woman from the tribe of Levi. Now, we don't need to worry about that right now, but you're going to learn a lot about Hebrew tribes. Levi is a tribe of priests later, okay? So Moses is of the line of Levi. And because he's a boy, his parents hide him. And their idea of hiding him is to build a basket, right? And to keep the basket, keep the child in the basket, and the basket hidden in the reeds along the Nile. Now again, you know how the story ends today. How does it end? It ends with the Hebrew people being rescued through water. Okay, the Hebrews, God separates the waters, and the Hebrews march down, and then Pharaoh's army follows. Tell me you remember the story? I was getting like no recognition. Nobody was nodding. No one was helping me. Made me nervous. So the story will end with God using water to save his people and destroy his enemies. And right at the very beginning, water is the tool by which the one who will lead them to safety himself is protected. Okay? In verse 3, when she could hide him no longer, she took him for a basket, took for him a basket made of bulrushes, daubed it with bitumen and pitch, and she put the child in it and placed it among the reeds at the river's bank. The word for reed, you need to know. Suf. Suf. S-U-P-H. Suf. It'll come back later. Okay. All right. So, you know this part of the story. Pharaoh's daughter. Now, Pharaoh has lots of daughters, likely, but Pharaoh's daughter is washing in the river, and she spies the basket. And one of Moses' sister has been given the chore of keeping watch. The child is brought out of the basket, and right away, there's no question. Everybody knows where this child is from. Huh? Look at verse 6. When she opened it, she saw the child, and lo, the babe was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." So remember, even if the Egyptians are like the bad people here, and in the Bible there's often, it seems a very clear distinction between good and bad. Always be careful. Okay? Even the Egyptians, there's Pharaoh's daughter who's undercutting her father by rescuing this child, who will eventually destroy Pharaoh's army. Okay? She has compassion. So the Egyptians aren't all villains. Moses' sister pops in and is happy to explain that that she maybe needs a nurse. And so again, ha ha ha, comedy. The Pharaoh's daughter hires a Hebrew woman to nurse the child, its mother. And so Moses' mother gets paid from the Egyptian treasury to do her child care. Okay? Verse 10. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. And the child is grown up now and weaned. And he became her son through adoption. And she named him Moses, for she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." Here's the first example of things that you're going to find frequently in the Bible. Etymologies explain how a word came to be formed. These etymologies are sometimes accurate, and sometimes they're made up. So like, here's an accurate, the etymology, made. Why, when your ship or your plane is in trouble, do you say Mayday? Got a clue? Because the first air, I know the airplane, Kitty Hawk, America, but the first people who really did adventuresome fighting with planes were French. And when they got in trouble, they would say, help is aider, and so Mayday, help me. Mayday is literally help me. Okay? So you'd say, help me, Mayday. Well, now we say M-A-Y-D-A-Y. That's a false etymology. That's actually the true etymology, but there are false etymologies. Well, maybe it happened in the month of May. No, see, that would be a false etymology. So this etymology is a somewhat forced one. She says, I call him Moses because I drew him out of the water. The word, there's a Hebrew word for draw, like is Moshe, or Masha. Moshe is the name, Masha is the word for draw. But if you know your Egyptian history, there were lots of Egyptian rulers who have the name Tutmosis, Sethmosis. Moses, in Egyptian, that means born of or child of. Okay? So the Hebrew text gives a false etymology based on the Hebrew word for draw, when in reality, Moses' name, we don't know, maybe the first part dropped off, but we know him as Moses, which is Egyptian for child of. Moses is child of Toth, okay, the god Toth. So it's that, you'll see that a lot. They want to know what a word means. So,